we are in the Unitarian Graveyard for another Lowcountry haunt, and we're here with Mike Brown. He's with Old Charleston Walking Tours, and we're glad to have you, and we're glad to be here because this is one of the more unique places, I would say, to see ghost tours. So when did you start doing ghost tours, first of all?
Well, I started doing ghost tours in the late 1990s, so I've been doing them for almost 20 years now.
All right, so you're an expert at some of these stories.
Well, I've certainly been doing it a long time.
Yes, all right. So tell me a bit why we're here, particularly at the Unitarian Graveyard.
Well, the Unitarian Graveyard is one of my favorite spots in the city. It has a long history of weird sightings occurring here, going back at least to the 1990s, probably much further back than that. Most of them involve seeing a young woman in a white dress, and she's been seen walking through various parts of the graveyard. We've had ghost tours where we would be standing at one of the gates at night and someone would shine a flashlight into the graveyard and they could see her standing there in the darkness. There has been numerous instances where people would talk about feeling a very strong presence, often described as very sad or even very angry. The story that in Charleston folklore that seems to connect to those sightings involves the ghost of a young woman who was engaged to be married to a soldier who was stationed at Fort Moultrie on Sullivan's Island in the early part of the 1800s, and that the family of the young woman did not like the soldier. They did not want her to marry him, and so they confined her to the house and they wouldn't allow the couple to see each other. The couple started sneaking around and they would meet here in this graveyard, and eventually they got caught. And so the family was able to have the soldier confined to the island, and he wasn't able to come into town and visit her anymore. And she got sick and ultimately passed away.
The story is sounding a little bit familiar.
Yes.
So we're now starting to reveal who the originator of the legend was.
Well, the name of the soldier officially was Edgar A. Perry, but it was discovered in 1885 that Edgar A. Perry was not his real name, that it was actually an assumed name for Edgar Allan Poe,
wow,
who had enlisted in the Army to escape from some gambling debts he had accrued at the University of Virginia.
I see. And so the lady, her name?
Well, we believe her to be Annabelle Lee Ravenel.
The legend has it that these two were in love with one another, but it was a love that couldn't be. And so what happened to them after that?
Well, supposedly she is buried somewhere here in this graveyard. He, of course, was said to have mourned her death and then eventually left the Army and left Charleston and then went on to become a famous writer, obviously, and poet. But supposedly she is buried somewhere here in the graveyard. There was a map drawn by a professor at the College of Charleston which said that she was buried in one particular spot, but when you go there, a lot of the tombstones are damaged and it's really hard to tell if that's the case. There's another suggestion that she may be buried in the area right behind you over there,
ooh,
which is where a number of members of the Lee family are buried.
Where all those beautiful flowers are growing?
Yes.
Interesting. So she's a spirit who's not at rest. She's still searching for her love?
Yes. I think she's sad and probably angry that she was denied the opportunity to be with the man that she loved, and that she has been unable to rest here in this graveyard all these years.
Such a beautiful story, and such a beautiful place, too.
But as we make our way toward the Charleston Library Society across the street and take a stroll down an eerie path, we come upon a gate some suspect is enveloped by paranormal activity, a spiritual presence so strong that people have been known to faint. We give it a try to see what happens, and it looks like we're in the clear.
All right, so we've made it across King Street and over to the Charleston Library Society, and this is where a very special ghost lives. Who is this person?
Well, we believe that the Library Society is haunted by the ghost of a man named William Godber Henson, who was a veteran of the Civil War and was also a planter on James Island. But his real passion was literature, and over the course of his life, he amassed a collection of thousands of books. And upon his death, he donated that collection to the society.
What happens when people come to visit the Charleston Library Society?
Well, there was an incident a number of years ago where a contractor was brought in to evaluate the building on ways that they could make it more energy efficient. And he started his inspection at the roof and then worked his way down to the basement. And as he was entered the basement, he said that he saw a man standing there, and he thought it was unusual because the man wasn't doing anything. He was just standing there with his back to him, and the man was wearing a very heavy coat, and this was in the summer. So he just continued his inspection, and then he heard the announcement that the library was closing, and when he came back upstairs, he saw that there was no one else left, and they were turning off the lights, and he told the librarians, "There's a man still downstairs." And he said the two librarians looked at each other, and they said, "No, there's not." And he said, "Yes, there is, I just saw him." And they told him, "No, that's the ghost."
Oh my goodness. And so what is he usually seen doing? Sitting there reading, or?
Well, he seems to linger around his collection. It almost seems like he loved his books so much that even in death, he didn't want to leave them, and I think he just wants to be near his books.
That is not the only special piece of collection that you have here in the Charleston Library Society. There's also another interesting book. Tell me a bit about this one. What is it called?
It's called The Blood Book.
And this is not belonging to this gentleman. This
No.
belonged to somebody else.
This was a journal that belonged to a poet by the name of Henry Timrod, who at the time of the Civil War was considered the poet laureate of the Confederacy.
I see. And so what is the legend behind his book?
Well, in 1867, Timrod, who was ill at the time, was writing in his journal. He was writing a poem, and in the middle of doing that, he vomited blood all over the journal, or at least over a portion of it, and he passed away. That journal is on display here in the library today.
Describe the book. So when they open it up, what do you see?
Well, it is an older journal, and in it you can see the handwritten pages from Timrod's poetry, as well, unfortunately, as the blood stain at the bottom of the page.
So there's a lot to see between the Unitarian Graveyard and the Charleston Library Society. And if anyone wants any more information about your tours, where can they go?
OldCharlestonTours.com.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Mike Brown. We'll have that information on our website as well, foxcharleston.com. We're back after this.